Okay, hello everyone. Damon Caskey here. I'm starting just a little bit early, so I'll probably repeat this intro in about 10 minutes or so. So for now, I'm just going to make sure that the stream is working and that I don't have anything else sucking up bandwidth. So hopefully I'll see some of you log on in just a few minutes, and I will see then if I can start answering some questions. Oh, I see you now, guys. It just, for some reason, it's not popping up on my streaming software that you were here. So we'll just have to exit that. And I'll have to get over here onto my YouTube studio instead to watch for incoming chats. Sorry about that. Looks like we've got about 5 minutes before we're scheduled to be live. Content live. Okay, looks like I have some devices sucking up some bandwidth here, so let's see if I can do something about that. Okay, Mohammed and Galaxis, just to make sure, are you guys able to actually get a decent stream from me? You're the only ones online right now. 11:58. We are getting close. Ah, I see that, Malik. Okay, just hopefully I'm not mangling the enunciation of that. Malik, okay? And it is 11:59 on my end. I'm just going to go ahead and call it 12 hours and jump right in. So, as I mentioned before, my name is Damon Caskey, and this is the first that I know of OpenBOR question and answer live stream, certainly the first from me. So the purpose is simple. I'm going to answer any questions that I can that you guys want to throw at me live. It's a little bit easier to do this in a voice format because I know sometimes my explanations in the forum can either be really terse or really long-winded, sometimes hard to understand. Now I'm going to start out with a question posed by Kimono. Let me bring it up on the forum here. I wish he'd posted it live like he was supposed to, but that's okay. Let's see here. Our general discussion, and I'm going to have to read it aloud for everyone. So Kimono asks about game concepts. I'm wondering how the enemy chooses which attacks he will use between attack 1, grab attack, free specials, and duck attack with no range set. I suppose that he won't be using duck attack. Well, you guys can see that on the forum. So Kimono, for you, the engine actually chooses attacks randomly. It goes through sort of a protracted process where first it checks to see if there's anything in range. Then it rolls a random number, and then it actually rolls a timed number. If that random number fails on attack 1, it will move to attack 2 if attack 2 exists, and so on through all the different attacks. Now what this means is attack 1 will have very slightly higher priority than attack 2. Attack 2 will have higher priority than 3, and so on. In practice, you're not going to notice it a whole lot if your entities have attack 1, 2, 3, and 4, and so on. They'll more or less appear random. This also works the same way for free specials, except free specials are chosen entirely at random and will outprioritize attacks. So far as I know, unless someone has inserted code that I don't know about, let's actually have a quick look here. We can bring the engine code right up on screen. I do not believe that the AI is capable of using duck attack without script. So what we can do is just look for the duck attack constant. And let's see, normal prepare. That is player only. Common try duck attack. So we found the common try duck attack function. Now let me see if it's anything that the enemy can use. Actually, I take that back. So duck attack is available. Looks like it will use it anytime that it is in range. So if you have entities that have duck attack, they can use it at will. Looks like they prioritize over pretty much anything else. If it's not already grabbing or uppercutting or blocking, then duck attack will come first. Now, he goes on to say, my other questions are about the new OpenBOR engine update. What are the new features that will be integrated to it, and if it has a release date? The release date keeps getting pushed back and back and back, and I'm very sorry about that. There's a couple of different reasons for this. The first is we've got some bugs to work out. There are two bugs specifically that are pretty much game breakers. That is, there was some code inserted by a former developer that causes entities to sometimes change directions erroneously when hit by attacks. So Kratos and I have been in lengthy discussions about that, and we're trying to get it resolved. Another bug is one that Plumbo is working on. He had inserted some brand new control code, and it's very robust. It handles a lot of the issues that people have been bringing up on forums where they try to bring or hook up their Xbox controller, they try to hook up this controller, that controller, and it just won't work. They get it confused with the keyboard. All that stuff has been washed away. Unfortunately, the configuration portion of that is totally broken. Right now, you can't configure player 2 without wiping away player 1's config and so on. It doesn't even show up on the menu. So Plumbo's working to fix that. Now, on my end, I am working to fix, not really fix, but rework all of the script access properties, starting with entities, moving on to draw methods, and right now, models. So if you guys recall, models and entities are two separate things. Now with our current entity access in script, there's a lot of properties that are not really entity properties. They're actually model properties. For instance, if you go to script right now, you can bring up an entity's max hit points. But there's no such thing as a max hit points property. It just doesn't exist. Hit points is a model property that's copied over to the entity. So what I'm working on with script, or with the new script access, is anything that is not properly an entity property will not be accessible through entity properties and vice versa. But I am giving you access to all of the model properties. Right now, you have access to very few of them. The script engine is also going to be much more object-oriented. So scripts are going to be a little bit lengthier vertically, but much less lengthy horizontally. So they'll be a lot more forward compatible. And that means in the future, they'll be backward compatible. But the real, I guess, meat and potatoes, and I'm going to bring this up on the screen so that you can see it, is that as we go along, or as I go along working on this, I am documenting each and every one of these features into the wiki so that when OpenBOR 4.0 is in fact released, it will be absolutely 100% documented end to end. And that is what's really taking the bulk of the time. So I'm not, let me be clear here. I'm not backlogging features that exist in the engine that haven't been moved to the wiki, but everything that I am modifying, I'm placing into the wiki. So the new features are going to be fully documented. Most of the old features will be fully documented, and we can take that old monolithic OpenBOR manual and throw it out the window, although I will leave it up for those who prefer to use it. So that should answer Kimono's questions. Now, okay, Malik, you want to know how the collision logic works in the source code. Sure thing. Let me actually bring up an image on the screen here. Let's see. Well, I don't, never mind, I don't think I have that image. So what I will do instead, and this is going to be a little silly, is I will actually physically draw it on paper. Or maybe I can even, we can do better. Let's bring up Photoshop. I told you this is, my first time out, so it's going to be a little janky, guys, and I apologize for that. Let me bring up an image that is 1000 by 1000. Okay, and then I'm going to grab a couple of images. Let's see. Let's just grab a picture of Alex. Actually, scratch that. Let's bring up a picture of Tyrus. All right, we'll copy this. Sorry. Copy this, stick it into here as a layer. Now let's grab a picture of, say, long moan. As soon as I can find a picture of long moan, run, walk. Here we go. Control A, copy, paste. All right. Color range and get rid of that. Range and get rid of that. Okay, select, deselect. Now, let's expand this just a little bit, and I'll try and give you an example of how the collision works. So let's move our long moan here over just a little bit. And let me check the studio, make sure that you can see what I'm doing. Okay. All right, so here we have Tyrus trying to attack long moan. The way the engine checks to see if that attack is effective or not is with a system of Cartesian coordinates. So when you actually put attack coordinates into text, these are translated on load into coordinates on the entity's animations. So if I were to draw a square around Tyrus's sword right there, that would be her collision, her attack box. Now if I were to draw a similar square around long moan to represent his body box, why don't I actually go ahead and draw those? So let's get a shape. Oops. Okay, layer, new layer. We'll call this attack box 0. And all I'm going to do is just fill it with a color. And then we'll give it some transparency there so we can kind of see around it. And then I'm going to do the same with long moan. So let's create another layer here, new layer, body box. And I will coat that in blue so that we can differentiate it from the attack box. Same thing, we'll change the opacity a little bit. And this will give you kind of a rough idea of how, let's move this down here, we'll tie it to Tyrus. This is kind of a rough idea of how the, oops, I moved the wrong thing. Goodness gracious, guys, I did say that I was going to be a little janky, so again, you'll have to forgive me of that. These boxes that I've drawn are just visual representations of the math the engine is doing. When the engine is running, it is running updates, kind of like an update script. So it goes through every active entity that is in play, and it checks the location, i.e. the coordinates of these attack boxes. And then it goes through every other entity that is in game again, and it compares the coordinates with the coordinates that are represented by the body box. If those coordinates overlap in any way, there is a collision. It is at that point that the internal native attack handling kicks in, and in most cases, of course, you get the pain reactions or the fall reactions, hit points are taken away, that sort of thing. And that's the basic idea of how collision works. Now, a major change that is coming is the access to multiple collision boxes. Now, the engine has actually supported multiple collision boxes for several years. The only reason you can't use them is we couldn't work out a way for you to put them into the text. That has been worked out in OpenBOR 4.0, so you will be able to have multiple collision boxes to have things that are a little more precise. As far as the code goes, that just means that when the entity is being checked, then it actually has to check for multiple boxes. So first you have multiple entities, it runs a loop, it gets to each entity, then it goes to the animation that that entity is running. It checks that entity's frame property, which contains its collision, and that collision itself is an array, and it goes from 0 to however many collisions exist, and then does the same process on the body box side. And if any one of those collisions take place, then it goes to the attack code. Now, incidentally, because of that, for efficiency's sake and for game functionality's sake, only one collision can ever occur at a time. This is a question that has been brought up a lot in the forum. How do I make attacks hit each other? The simple answer is you don't. There is no such thing as attacks that can hit attacks, because there just can't be multiple collision boxes at the same time. One or the other entity takes a hit. If you've seen games like Street Fighter where attacks can collide with each other, that's because they've programmed a secondary check once an attack hits to see if the other entity is also attacking, and if those two attacks can overlap, then it will take action where the attacks clash or both people get hit. And that is something you can do in OpenBOR, and I'll try to explain it later on. So anyway, let's move on to the next question. Let's see. BWD asks, is there any particular reason why the layer transparency and parallax, or excuse me, why a layer BG transparency and parallax hit the CPU so hard? Honestly, I haven't experienced that problem, and I have layered, tons and tons and tons of parallax. I would need to see your parallax layers. If I were to venture a guess, if you have a layer, now remember the engine will try to optimize everything as it loads in, but if you have a layer that has a very rough outline, so for instance, let me just go to brush. If I have a layer that has a mountain, and that mountain has a lot of vertical range, but then most of the scenery is kind of down here, when the engine tries to optimize that, what's going to happen is you have a massive amount of blank space. Now, I know this is going to sound very hard to believe. You just have to trust my expertise on this. It is much more difficult for an engine to draw a transparent pixel than an opaque pixel. And I'm not just talking about transparency effects like this. I mean a fully transparent pixel. The reason for that is the engine has to calculate whether or not that pixel is opaque or not, and decide what's behind it before it can draw it. Whereas in the case of an opaque, it just draws it, and it's a first come, first serve. So one thing I would recommend you try is, if you have a lot of layers, to try and trim them down to something uniform. So if you've got something that has like a lot of this, then trim it down to a single layer, and that way the engine is able to bring in the horizontal space, and then have this guy where the engine can call in the vertical space, and you don't have as many transparent pixels on the screen. Now, as far as the parallax scrolling goes, that can cause a CPU load, because you have to remember that in OpenBOR, we're running software. We don't have access to hardware interrupts like what you saw in 16-bit systems back in the day, or 4th gen systems back in the day. So everything is done as a computation first. In other words, that image is computed pixel by pixel, how much each pixel is going to be expanded horizontally to get you the so-called mode 7 effect, what's really an affine transformation, and that can get pretty CPU intensive. Again, I've never had a problem with it, so when I'm off this live stream, maybe we can talk later on, and I'll take a look at your layers and see why you're having that individual problem. All right, next question. Is there any limitation placing objects in very wide stages? When I place an object further than chords, it just does not appear. But when I do it chords before, it works. That's a new one on me. I can tell you that objects in the engine, once they move so far off screen, they are destroyed automatically for optimization purposes. You can adjust that. Let me see if I can find the flag for it. Oops, wrong thing. Let's see. Let me look at the code here. Off screen. Screen kill. Oh, it says it can't find it. Okay, that's a new one. Oh, that's because we're not in the right place. OpenBOR find, command model off screen kill. And that leads us to the object variable of off screen kill. Okay, yes, you can actually adjust that with a, let me go back to commands here. So try off-screen kill in your model text and set that to a value that is greater than the amount you're setting it off-screen. And if that doesn't correct it, post the question in the forum and we'll take another look. Oh, just to clarify, different types of models do have different default off-screen kill values, just to answer your second question there. And as I read this, I see that you guys are answering each other, so sorry about that, I'm a little behind. BWD wants to know, isn't SDL hardware accelerated? Some properties of it are, some properties of it aren't. To be honest, that is low-level coding that goes a little bit beyond my expertise. That's kind of the whole point of SDL. It's pretty much just a black box that we send the graphics to, and then SDL takes care of things from there. So I don't have a hard answer for you on that. I'll have to study up, and then I'll get back to you. Mr. Dano. What is the easiest way to emulate multiple V-boxes? For example, the tip of the body can block, lower attack. Now that one I've already done before. If you have ever noticed in some of my videos for Fatal Fury, when the characters block or take hits, they actually take the hit where it happens on their body. And the calculation for that is actually not too complicated. I'm going to bring up the code and I will show it to you. Let's see, Fatal Fury Chronicles, data. Scripts. I just have to find it, which I know that's kind of silly, but cares. Just bear with me for a moment here while I look up the script so I can bring it up. Where are you? Let's see. Take damage script, common event. Oh, there it is. Okay. Cares. So data scripts. Okay, scripts take damage main. Well, evidently I am looking at a version where I removed that code. Well, so be it. I'll actually just type the code right live on the screen for you to see. So I'm going to type a real quick pseudo function for you here. So what I'm doing in all of my systems, Deno, is hope I don't mind. I'm going to use your name, Daniel, on the screen. So DC height EX. And what I do is the engine has a property called last hit. So let's say integer, let's see, I'm just going to call it last y equals last OpenBOR variant. And so that I'm giving you something that's correct, let's go to OpenBOR script. Last hit Y, okay. You can probably tell where I'm going from this already, or going with this already. So what we do is we get last hit Y. Okay, then I get the entity's property of height, and let's see, get entity property, and this probably isn't correct, but you'll be able to find height. And I can also get the animation height if I need it. So at this point, I'm going to write some pseudocode. All I'm really doing is I get the height and I divide the hit location. So last hit, let's see, hit height equals last y divided by height. That gives me a percentage of the height where the hit actually occurred. And then from there, I can decide how I want to react. So if it's in the top 10%, then I consider it a head hit. If it's somewhere in the middle, I consider it a body hit. If it's a lower, I consider it a foot hit. And using that logic, you could just pretty much go wild with it. You could actually get the horizontal position if you really wanted to, in case you wanted to get somebody like hitting at an extended limb or in the back, something to that effect. But the logic is really very basic. You just get the last hit position, which I'm going to go back over to the OpenBOR script. You can see they are available: the last hit A, the last hit confirm, last hit, that's an object, the X, and the Z positions. And then all you have to do from there is just make some calculations to see precisely where the hit took place, and that allows you to simulate your own body boxes. Gosh, and boy, things. Can you zoom in? The text is too small. Sorry about that, Malik. Let me see if I can make the text a little bit bigger. There we go. There are the last hit variables that I was talking about. Again, these are all available through the OpenBOR variant command. And here is the simple pseudocode that I had. So yet again, I get the last hit height, and then I get the height of the entity, and then I compare those by creating a percentage, and from there my code kind of becomes static just for me. So if it's within the top 10%, it's a head hit, and so on and so forth, and that's how I'm able to create multiple body boxes. Will Secure Pack ever come back? Probably not. That is a very back burner thing. I never agreed with SX when he created Secure Pack because I feel like it creates too many ego problems. If it does come back, then I will control it severely. Only items, and I've said this many times before, and I don't like repeating myself, but I will say it one more time. Only modules that contain 100% original assets will be secured. That's the hard line. I don't care how much work went into something. If it isn't yours, then I will not secure it. But that's assuming Secure Pack does come back at all. It's a very back burner thing. It's just not a priority. I've got too much on my plate. If I get a chance, then yes, I'll try to bring it back. So the question is maybe, but not anytime soon. Let's see. Well, looks like I actually caught up with most of the questions. I guess do you have anything else or anything you'd like to clarify that I've already, or like me to clarify that I've already said? Added support for all options into script. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Malik. Can you clarify that for me? You shot me down on the idea. To be honest, I don't remember what we're talking about here. So if you can maybe clarify, I could at least explain why I shot it down, because right now I'm just not sure what you're talking about. So you could toggle everything in the options menu on and off, like for a custom. Oh, okay. Yeah, there is a reason I shot that down in script, because we're actually working on a menu, actually, Plumbo and I discussed, we're working on a menu system that would kind of work like an XML document. And so accessing that through script, the way the engine code works right now, it's really not feasible. It's not so much that I don't want to do it, it's that we would have to pretty much rework the way everything runs right now. So it's just not really feasible. I can look at specific options if you want, but yeah, right now doing the entire menu accessible to script just really isn't in the cards, especially because right now you can already create your own menu from scratch, which Kratos has done. I know it's not a great solution, guys, but it's just really the best I can offer at the moment. Hmm. BWD or BWWD, sorry. The best option that I've heard of, this isn't something that I have a whole lot of experience in, because again, most of my modules I don't really mind the people getting into them, but I know before he left the community, Andrew was big on Molebox, so you might want to try Molebox. If there's not Molebox, if it doesn't exist still, I'm sure there's solutions like it. What I will do is, that's something I need to educate myself on a little better. So again, I know a lot of these answers are, I'm not really sure, but again, guys, I don't know everything. I will look up Molebox myself and see if it's a viable solution, and if it's not, what might be a good alternative towards it. But yeah, I do know there are a lot of packaging systems out there that can lock all your assets and the engine up into a single unit, which is another reason why I'm kind of not really big on Secure Pack, because it's sort of reinventing the wheel. But once again, Molebox is the one that I know of by name, and so look that up and see if that does anything for you. Yes, Malik, that's the idea, is that something is better in the works than just an arbitrary script switch on and off for menu pieces. And looks like I missed a question from Dano. I tried the last hit before, but with block, it seems to randomize and allow some hits. Can I have a look at your code later on? Maybe either post it on the forum or stick it in a gist, and I can kind of see if I can solve it individually. Because yeah, I've used this for both blocking and hits, and it has worked. I mean, it's worked perfectly for me. I mean, that's the whole reason that I actually started the script up, was specifically for blocking, because I always liked where S and K back in the day in Fatal Fury games, when they blocked high, they would put their guard up, and they block middle and they block low, as as opposed to Street Fighter where everybody just used a static animation for everything. Excuse me, I just want to take a, excuse me for a second, take a drink of my protein shake here. Stuff smells bad and tastes worse, but it's supposed to be good for you. With all due respect, Malik, I'm not really sure how user-friendly you want it to be. I mean, there's a reason that people use OpenBOR as opposed to, well, pretty much anything else for side-scrolling games. I mean, I'm not trying to shoot you down or anything. It's just that, I mean, do you want a fully functional engine or do you want a kiddie toy? Because, I mean, I can go over to Fighter Maker on the PlayStation 2 and just draw polygons, and sure, it works great, but it's very limited in what it can do. I think what you're really asking for is a very powerful editor program, which I would love to see, but I only have so much time in the day and I devote that to building the engine. If somebody else wants to take up the task of building an editor that will make everything user friendly and graphic user interface based, I'd love to see it. It's just not within my scope right now. Dano, it's not necessarily something you're doing wrong. Again, just because it works for me doesn't mean that somebody else doesn't have problems. It's like BWD having issues with layers. I know that he knows how to use the engine and use it very well. It's just sometimes you have different situations. Maybe my CPU just happens to like the layers a little bit better. So we'll just take a look at your code. I don't think you're breaking anything. There just might be something sort of silly that's missing that we can sort of root out. Mm. Malik, I agree. I love Chronocrash modders tools. I just wish it was more stable. That's kind of the thing is, again, I just don't have enough time in my day to take care of the engine, to take care of the form, and build an editor too. I really like Chronocrash modders tools. It's just the fact that it's not really finished and stable. OpenBOR editor is also really good, but again, it's also not finished and stable. So if anybody out there has some coding expertise and you'd like to take up this mantle, by all means, I would welcome it. Will we get ping support with alpha for FG layers panels? Hmm. Um, what exactly are you asking for BWD? Because I'm not sure what you mean, because we already have alpha blending, or not alpha blending, excuse me, alpha channels for layers and entities. I was just thinking that without scripts, shouldn't be able to make a decent mod. I personally love scripts myself, but on the surface with you, I agree, Malik. The problem is the question always comes down to why can't we have something that is consistent and lets me just put in some real simple text and let me do whatever I want, and inevitably what they are asking for is script. Um, Script is based on C language, which of course came out of Unix, which came out of the 60s, and to this day Nobody has been able to come up with something better. The very second that they do, I mean, I'll be the first person to jump ship. If someone ever makes an engine where all I have to do is just take a light pen and draw something on screen and also allows me to make it do exactly what I wanted to do, I will drop OpenBOR like a ton of bricks. It's just that, I mean, what else are you going to do instead of script? I mean, let me give you an example for grappling. I always hear complaints about, well, OpenBOR's grappling sucks. It sucks. It sucks. And well, yes, it actually does. OpenBOR's grappling support sucks rocks. But there's a reason for that. Maybe you want to create a suplex where you're simulating Blaze suplexing Gausia. But I, on the other hand, want to simulate Hager's spinning pile driver. Or maybe I want to do like what I've done in Golden Axe, where you have Axe Battler performing all of King's throws. There's no system out there that is going to, let me rephrase that. There's no way for us to predict exactly what the creator wants to do because there are way too many variables there. I mean, I could create a grappling system that asks you, what are the coordinates that you want the other entity bound to? How many entities do you want bound to that entity? Which layer do you want that entity bound to? How much damage do you want to do when that entity gets hit the first time? How much do you want it to, damage do you want to get done the second time? And so on and so forth. And all of these things require variables that would bloat the engine beyond recognition. Not only would it be every bit as complicated as script, but it also would be very suboptimal because it's going to use a lot of CPU power. So again, I'm not trying to shoot you down. I'm just saying there's a very practical reason why we use scripts for what we do. Now, one of the things the new engine or the OpenBOR 4.0 is going to do is greatly simplify the scripts and get rid of some things that I don't really think you should have to use scripts for. But ultimately, when it comes down to logic, if you want to insert logic of if this, then do that, then that's very, people that are very much smarter than you and me have already figured out how to do that, and that's what script is. So we won't get jagged edges between panel and background. Alpha channel and ping would smooth that out. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that, BWD, but we already have alpha channels. Unless I'm mistaken, that support has already been added to where you can actually customize your own alpha channels to the panels. You don't need to you don't need to put a 32-bit ping in there. Let me check the code. Let me check the source code just for posterity here, because I don't want to tell you something that isn't true. Let's see. Command model alpha. There it is, alpha mask. Okay. Let me look at the alpha mask and see if it is. Actually, BWD, I am sorry. We do not have alpha masking for layers and panels. So that is something that I think would be a great addition to the future. So I'll look into that. Yes, actually, Luca makes a good point. Scripts don't make a module good. I mean, a good module is a good module. That said, guys, I would be really careful if you are trying to create certain advanced functionality without scripts. I have seen, and I'm not going to name names, but I know one person in particular, his modules are, they kind of work, but he puts himself through weeks and weeks and weeks of ridiculous hackarounds when 2 lines of script would solve his problem instantly. So scripts don't make a module good, but make sure that you're not giving yourself extra work when a very simple script would take care of it. Ask us questions and I'll do everything I can to help. Dano, I can tell you right now that chiptunes won't ever happen. Man, I hate to give negative answers all over the place. There's a technical reason for that though. Chiptunes only work properly when you actually have hardware to support them. Sound cards don't have chiptune hardware in them anymore. So we actually have to generate them with software, meaning that you're not really going to get the savings that you think you'll get. So honestly, you're better off just to record those chiptunes as a WAV file and just play them as is. Plumbo actually explained that a lot better than I ever could. And if you want, I'll dig that up in the forum and post it to you. Grab a drink of water here. Okay, I don't see any more questions flowing in, so I'm going to stick around for, looks like I'm going to stick around till about 1300 hours, so that's about 15 more minutes, and I guess I'll just do some live coding. If I see any other questions roll in, I'll try to answer them for you. Oh, looks we're good. Goodness gracious, it would help if I knew how to spell. Oh, you want, okay, well, give me a second, I'll bring it up for you. Let's see. I need to zoom this code out just a little bit. Hang on a second. Oh, looks like, let me see if I can dial in 125%. Can you see that okay? Oh, if you can't, just let me know. I'll bring up, and I'm going to bring up the collision logic. Oh, fine. Okay. When you said finer, I was like, what do you mean? Okay. Excellent. All right. It's been a while since I've worked on the collision code, so let me find it here. Let's see. It's not common attack. Okay, so engine code is obviously much more complicated than any script, and I can't really show it to you all at once on screen because it's made up of multiple functions. But this is the basic gist of it. So this function, check collision versus body, receives the check collision data. So the check collision data is what has the coordinates and whatnot. So first we get an animation. I'll try and walk you through it. It's been a while since I've written this code, so I've kind of forgotten some of it. Yeah, first we get an animation, and then we get our target frame. And right off the bat, if this animation does not have a collision body, then we exit out. That's important not only for optimization purposes, but also because if we tried to check a null pointer, we'd get a seg fault and the engine would crash. And by crash, I mean a real crash, not just a error that you guys tend to call crashes. So here at this point is where the multiple collision boxes actually work. So the collision body is an array, and I need to back up just a little bit here because this is going to seem kind of crazy. In OpenBOR, you have an entity that has animations, and an animation in theory has multiple frames, but it doesn't work that way at all. In OpenBOR, there's actually no such thing as a frame property. The way it works instead is each individual animation property that is divided into frames has its own array. So, for example, you have an animation, and then what you would consider frame 1 is actually a sprite that has an array. Excuse me, guys, I need to mute this for just a second. Sorry about that. Okay, anyways, as I was saying, so you have an animation, and then that animation has a property called frame for, say, a sprite. So animation sprite, and then that is an array. So sprite 0 is the frame 0 sprite, and then sprite 1, sprite 2, sprite 3, so on and so forth. Now, the reason this is done is because in C code, well, actually in a lot of different codes, you need to know the size of an array before you allocate it. So, and there are dozens upon dozens of so-called frame properties. If we just had a frame and that frame contained all the properties, and we just said frame 1, 2, 3, 4, whatnot, then we would have to allocate a crap ton of memory right off the bat, most of it not being used for anything. So this is very important to understand. So there is an animation, and there is a collision body, and you'll see frame, and that is our frame index. But there's no, you'll notice there's no animation frame array then collision body. Now, the collision body, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever that represents a frame, then also routes to a check collision function. And this check collision function is going to go through each individual collision body box, which is itself an array. So let me bring up the check collision function. So this function is where we actually do the Cartesian coordinate comparison. We receive a seeker position The seeker position is what you would think of as the attack, and then we receive a detect position that is the body. Now, in the case of the entity facing left or right, obviously we need to do something about the X position. And once we actually have a seek position and a detect position, then we can start comparing the overlap. And as this commenting says, this looks backwards, but we're not crazy. OpenBOR is, now you guys ask for OpenBOR to be user-friendly. I think in some ways it's a little bit too user-friendly because many of the values that you put in OpenBOR text are sanitized. They have nothing to do with the values the engine actually needs or uses. So in the case of attack and collision boxes, what you think is the top is actually the bottom. So we have to flip those around before we can make a comparison, and you can see that going on here. Now, obviously, if something falls out of a collision on an axis, then we get out right away. So if there is if we're out of bounds on the bottom to the top, then there's no reason to go any farther because it doesn't matter if we're inbounds on X or Z. So we check the top because it's the simplest. Then we check Z because it's also simple. And then after that, we have to start checking the, we have to start checking the X and Z together because remember, OpenBOR is in more or less 3D. So we have to find an average position that this collision took place in. We need that to spawn flashes, and we'll push that out to collision data. And that's pretty much how it works. Again, I'm shortcutting a lot of things here because there's some functions here that are 10 miles long, but here's your basic gist. And if that doesn't do it for you, then I guess post on the forum, or maybe in another live session, I'll see if I can go into a little bit more detail. All right, looks like we've got some dead air going on. All right, it is almost 1300 hours, guys, so if you don't have any more questions for me, I'm going to sign off. I would like to know if this has been useful to you at all. If it has been, then I'll try and make it a regular thing. Well, if not, then, well, no reason to waste my time on it or to bug you guys, so it's up to you. I will say that if there is a next time, hopefully I'll be just a little bit more proficient at it. Again, this is the first time I've ever done a live Q&A. You are welcome, sir. All right, it is now 1300 on my end, guys, and I would like to stay on and do some live coding, but unfortunately my paid position demands my attention. So I'm going to sign off. I'll leave this stream up so you can watch it again if you want. Hopefully my answers were helpful. If not, I'll try and do a little bit better next time, and we'll see about running this next week. If you have times where you would prefer for me to be on, as opposed to high noon, then by all means let me know and give me some suggestion, guys, and I'll do my best to help you out. We'll see you on the forum, and be good, everybody.